So the writing process kind of varies. With this particular track, I think I remember that bass line just looping that for 8 bars, made a little, just like the little beat over it. And then just closed my eyes, and then I then just hit record, and then all I heard was da 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 da, and then I was like, oh, black is the power, black is my skin, and then the rest of it, it's just kind of like little fragments that kind of come to me, and yeah, that track was a very quick track to write, in the sense that everything just kind of came together. It was like a perfect storm. Well, my brain was on the same frequency as all of the sounds that are coming out. But and other times it's kind of like I'll take a book around with me or use my phone notes and just kind of think about phrases that I like, words that I like, note them all down and then thread them all together. But with this track, it was
Hello, I'm Thomas Cam, and this is Making Tracks podcast, where I explore the life story behind a song with the artist that wrote it. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the meaning of music. Today I'm speaking to Grove, a Bristol-based vocalist and producer whose music combines elements of punk-infused dancehall, jungle, bass and pop to make this amazing mixture of music. And their latest EP is called Queer and Black and is very much an exploration of their identity. And we're particularly focusing on their track Black, which is about the toppling of the Edward Colston statues and about their exploration of black identity. And our discussion begins with about identity and fluidity and self-exploration, and then expands into a really wide-reaching conversation about AI, about Nina Simone, and about evolving as a society, and finally crescendoing into a finding that we can have identity beyond classification and finding that shared experience. So the record that this track is from is called Queer and Black, and I wondered if you could elucidate what being queer means to you, and secondly how that combines with your identity as being black.
So in terms of my queerness, it's a constantly expanding journey is how I like to kind of think about it, because it is this ever shifting, ever kind of morphing, this fluid like expression of myself and like my interests. That also relates to like community as well. I think growing up I was like, oh, I'm gay because I like girls. But I think growing up and finding more of like community within like queerness is like this kind of less of a tangible like, oh, you like this therefore you're this. It's just like this this beautiful umbrella of terms, which
certain fluidity as well.
Exactly. I think fluidity is kind of like the main anchor point of it, in terms of like gender fluidity, in terms of like fluidity in terms of sexual expression, sexual preferences, all these different things. And I think what's great as well is learning about the history, the roots of like queer community, and that being like really, I mean, it's Pride Month at the minute, which I think a lot of people are like, yay, it's Pride Month, woohoo, let's party. But I think it's really important to remember the roots of Pride being like a protest, in order to be viewed as equals within society. For example, I think the most commonly referred to thing is the Stonewall riots, where Marsha P. Johnson, or another unidentified person, threw that first brick to oppose like the heavy policing of their existence. And I think it's really great within Pride Month to reflect on the roots of where gay pride comes from, and how that relates to the current kind of queer community, and our freedom to express ourselves with less judgment kind of entailed, and more acceptance, more acceptance.
Exactly, yeah, acceptance. And I mean, these are things that I'm very, I guess, freedom and acceptance as a whole are such valuable things. And yeah, I mean, it's fantastic that's expanding into things like gender and sexuality. And so coming back to the second question, how does that tie into your Black identity?
Yes, so I think in terms of my Black identity, that has also been something that I've had to discover growing up. So I'm of dual heritage, so I'm half Jamaican and quarter Irish, quarter English. But I grew up in a place called Cheltenham, which is...
I grew up in Stroud, so
hey!
I mean, I know Cheltenham. Yeah. Cheltenham is very posh.
Very posh.
Not, if anyone's not been to Cheltenham, it is very posh.
Very posh place.
Spa town.
Yeah, there we go. Regency architecture and limited amount of kind of brown minority ethnic faces knocking about, which meant that growing up, I wasn't really taught. So my mum is a Jamaican lady. But she didn't really teach us much about Black history. We kind of went to the schools where there's mostly white people. There were all these like people acknowledged that I was brown and kind of made these little jokes like, oh ha ha ha, the lights turned off. Where's Beth gone? Blah, blah, blah. Hilarious, and all just like these subtle things that at the time I was just like, oh ha ha, that's a funny joke.
It's just a joke, yeah.
Yeah.
I actually, so I'm to kind of frame myself, I'm half Chinese Malaysian. So similarly, my mum came from Malaysia, and it's quite a specific thing where she's Chinese and the family are Chinese, but they moved to Malaysia about 200 or 300 years ago, so don't actually have that strong of a connection to China. And my mum's never been to China, I've never been to China, so I have my own journey with discovering that, even though I have quite a strong connection to Malaysia. But similarly, my mum came to the UK when she was at school, quite young, and similarly, like she didn't necessarily talk that much about it. She didn't speak to me in Chinese and Hokkien, which is the dialect there. So yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about your own experiences and actually school as well. I remember I didn't think about until quite recently about how it affected the way I've been treated. I always thought, I've not really had anything different because I'm Chinese, because I'm Asian. But actually looking back, I went to a boys' grammar school, and I kept record once, and every single day someone would make some kind of reference to me being not white, and it wouldn't always be negative, so I wouldn't necessarily think about it as bad, but you kind of internalize it. And so I know the thing, and the idea of if you take offense, people will be like, oh, we're just joking, it's just kidding, and then you're a spoil sport if you take offense, right?
Exactly. And it's just that constant reminder of like, you're different, you're different. And as you say, I think the subliminal nature of a lot of it, it just does mean that a few years down the line, you're like, oh, actually, I think there's some stuff that I need to unpick here. Not necessarily like majorly traumatic, but just like, oh, like some, I don't know, just potentially maybe self-deprecating, or just even just being aware of how you are in a space, how you're perceived in a space constantly. I think a lot of people, don't get it in a sense, in like a racial sense. It doesn't.
I mean, there's something essential to identity about how you're perceived. I think, and this is perhaps a separate thing, but in terms of existing as a person in the world, I often don't like to. I like to seclude myself and be in a place where I'm not seen, which isn't necessarily because I'm super shy, I wouldn't say it's necessarily to do with my race, but it's to do with this sense of having a concrete self. And there's two things. There is the self as I am existing now, and if I'm just seeing things, I'm feeling things, and then there is Tom as the object, the person, the name with kind of things that are perceived, and I don't know. Sometimes I like to just be without necessarily existing as a person. The word person means mask. Actually, it's from the word persona. It's like those Greek tragedy masks. So to be a person is to wear a mask, is to be perceived, and to be a person. And sometimes I find that quite jarring. I'd rather just be in this meditative experience rather than an object, you know?
My partner actually speaks a lot about that. Yeah, on occasion, just kind of being like, you know, I kind of just, don't want to be perceived right now. I just kind of want to be this floating orb that is existing in some form, but just not being taken. Yeah, it's just really interesting to hear the parallels of what you said and what they speak about as well.
Yeah, I guess something identity is not something I've thought about probably certainly as much as yourself, and I know that as a musician I haven't really thought about it artistically, but I mean your music is very, very much involved with that, and this song in particular which is called Black is very much about your Black heritage and your identity.
It is, and it's very much, well, it was written as a reaction after the Edward Colston statue got toppled in Bristol round about a year ago to this day, and I think that really provoked, because before, so I view like my true education in my own Black identity beginning when I finished school, like when I was 18 when I finished school, and yeah, like I think discovering, reading, learning about all the different atrocities that people of colour of the diaspora have been through in every single country in Europe, in all of North America, all of South America. It's one of those things where it's really tough and kind of sometimes like angering to find out these things, but it's almost like you've got to be angry in order to understand the horrible history that people of all different minorities have been through throughout the world. But yes, so the track Black was written after that Edward Colston statue was pulled down, and I wanted to reframe all of that anger and all of that kind of all of that anger and frustration that had built up over years of learning about these things, and reframe it as like, oh, you know, this is something to be really proud of. This is something to, you know, that I genuinely do feel proud of.
Feel pride about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I always think it's important to celebrate these being of a marginalised identity, as you know, as well as acknowledging the difficulties that it brings. I think the celebration aspect is definitely of equal importance in order to progress within yourself as an individual and as a collective group of people.
Unfortunately, due to YouTube's copyright restrictions, I can't play the full track here, but there is a link to the YouTube video of the song in the description. If you'd like to listen to the full episode uninterrupted next time, you can do so on the website or on all podcast platforms, and there are links to those in the description. Hopefully, you've now had time to listen to the song, so let's get back to the conversation. Yes! Love it. Yeah, it's great. I mean, the music is that real drive. It's got that anger, right? That aggression in that the driving. That driving beat. I don't know how did you make that sound? The bum 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 bum. The central.
Oh, the bass line, like the
central
whoa,
bass.
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
yeah,
whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
Well, I've got this incredible plugin that just deals with really meaty basses called Reactor, and that was what the whole track was based around. Yeah. Like that was the first thing. And I was like, okay, well, this track's just gonna make itself from this point onwards.
Yeah.
But yeah, really infusing the kind of dancehall Caribbean roots with the drum beat. And yeah, just I'm a big fan of kind of like dark, glitchy, twisted noises, and
yeah, it has such darkness. Yeah. When in terms of writing, so you say you had that riff and it became the core of the song. When you write lyrics, do you kind of have that on loop and then you write over the top those words, and then you kind of edit them down? Is that your writing process?
So the writing process kind of varies. With this particular track, I think I remember that bass line just looping that for 8 bars, made a little just like the little beat over it, and then just closed my eyes, and then I then just hit record, and then all I heard was da 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 da, and then I was like, oh, black is the power, black is my skin, and then the rest of it is just kind of like little fragments that kind of come to me, and yeah, that track was a very quick track to write, in the sense that everything just kind of came together. It was like a perfect storm, where my brain was on the same frequency as all of the sounds that are coming out. But at other times it's kind of like I'll take a book around with me or use my phone notes and just kind of think about phrases that I like, words that I like, note them all down and then thread them all together. But with this track it was
I love that phrase of the perfect storm. That's so on this podcast is all about songwriting and how it ties in with story as well. But like, I'm always asking people how they write songs, and that idea I think about it as alchemy, that kind of unknowable, strange process that you can't capture and you can't define. But I think for me, I do a few different art forms. I mean, I kind of write and I perform, theatre and stuff. But for me, there's nothing quite like the moment that a song just happens. And there is always a moment you're like, yes, this is the song. Because it's like bringing together sound and dance and, lyric. And yeah, for me, that's just so special. That's kind of what I live for, really.
Totally. I love the phrase alchemy as well.
Yeah.
I've always been a big fan of like video games, and alchemy I think it's, within like maybe a RuneScape, it featured there's like magic alchemy. Within Skyrim there's some alchemy going on,
Wow, RuneScape throws me back.
I've started playing it again recently.
Oh,
I downloaded the old school RuneScape. And I've just been trudging around the RuneScape world, like exploring places I actually hadn't explored before. Because before I'd just be like, right, chop the trees, chop the trees, make the fires.
Yeah. Now you're doing your more exploratory mindset, I suppose.
There we go.
Yeah, exploration.
Yeah, we love.
Self-exploration, I think, is absolutely central to who we are, I think, and not everyone gets that chance. I feel something that with my growing up Asian at school, there were times when I thought, oh, why am I different? This sucks, but now I think, wow, how amazing that I have 2 whole heritages to explore. Like, I like being English and British and Celtic, and there's a great history to being English, but I love there's like a 4,000-year-old civilization, one of the most rich, dense histories, philosophically, artistically, that there is, and it's like getting to explore both identities. And because I grew up in an English environment and a white environment, that's been something that I've absorbed. But to have this thing that's like, okay, here's this massive vessel of history and culture that you get to explore for yourself. That's amazing. And, like I said, I've not actually been to China, although I've spent a lot of time in Malaysia with my Malaysian Chinese family. So I don't know. But yeah, the idea of exploration, I think, just feeds out into so many things. And when I think about what is it I want to do with my life, and people ask, what, not that people often ask me, what do you want to do with your life? Or what do you think the meaning of life is? It's normally me doing that because I have that kind of mindset. But for me, it's self-realization, which is to realize who you are and then to make that real, and to go into the deeps of yourself and be like, okay, I can realize what is it that makes me me, what is it that is the one thing that is genuinely unique about me, that I can be the best at, and that's being myself in this unique way. That's the unique thing that I've been given this chance to live to do. It's a gamble to explore who can I be in the world, who can I be, what is my nature, and then through the things that you do with your life and the actions and the thoughts and the ways that you express yourself to make that real in the world. Yeah.
And I think as well, what's interesting about that as a concept is, I guess a lot of people are like, oh, assume that there is one you, there is one version of you, and that is it. But I think I used to have like lots of interesting conversations with my ex in which we discuss kind of like, oh, but there are so many like yous that you can realize, like it isn't just like one thing, it's this whole again constantly expanding fluid thing that is there to be constantly explored. And as well, I think what was it, Jim Carrey, who's like kind of gone down the route of like, oh, I am no one, like it's almost just like I don't have a self because I can switch between anything, which I'm really intrigued to look further into, because I've only kind of read kind of like a surface level of what he's been exploring, but definitely sounds interesting.
Well, that's exactly what I was talking about earlier, saying that I like to not have a self and not, when with the to not necessarily be out in public. I mean, I know Jim Carrey's quite kind of taken a step back from public life as well, and because to be perceived creates different selves. I think it's Foucault, but certainly there's a lot of talking about where is the true self, and is there a true self, and is it just a kind of conglomeration of all the different ways that you're perceived? Because I don't think it's a bad thing that you're a different person with your parents than you are with your friends than when you're on your own. They're all kind of you, Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's something that not that everyone thinks about, but I think it's so interesting to think about the ways that we are different, and therefore, who I am in this context. Yeah,
it gives like a solid sense of purpose as well. I think like my self-discovery journey has not necessarily achieved like happiness, but it's achieved purpose, which I think are two things that are equally, if not change in terms of importance. Like meaning and purpose.
It's interesting that your purpose in terms of as an expression of art is so tied up with, as you say, it kind of comes out of your identity, and it's kind of, there's this beautiful interplay of the two, and they both empower the other.
Absolutely. And as well, identity, I think, doesn't just expand to like racial identity or sexual identity. Yeah, it's like kind of your identity within society, like kind of like class systems as well, like how just kind of how our identities within such a big construct like capitalism, we're all playing certain roles within this big exploitative
system,
machine, exactly. And that's another thing that I've just over the past maybe 4 or 5 years just kind of been constantly delving into and exploring. And another thing that is infuriating, because there is so much power disparity, wealth disparity as well in the world, and just trying to readdress that balance in whatever small ways that we can as individuals, collectives, is another ongoing journey, I think. It definitely ties in with the themes of another track in the EP called Fuck Your Landlord, which just encourages people to reflect, like, wow, what role does landlord serve in society other than like, give me a third of the money that you earn and we're going to give you subpar housing.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest issues, that in terms of as a young person, right, the biggest issue that's different in terms of our generation, I think, is to do with rent and owning property. It's so prohibitively expensive, and you hear so many stories about someone who bought a house for one of my friend's granddads bought a house for $2,000 in the 40s and just sold for $1 million pounds because it's in London. It's like now it's completely, how can we own property, and then it's just going to be a delayed effect. And the thing is, I don't know what the solution is, because if house prices fall like they did in 2008 or whatever, like it kind of destroys it's like really bad for the economy. So it's kind of, I don't really know what the solution is, but it's so difficult. It makes things so difficult, particularly as artists. My friend was saying he's really interested in like the 60s and the Rolling Stones and that, or that kind of era, and he said back then, if you lived in the country, if you lived in Cheltenham and you're like, right, I'm gonna go to the big city, I'm going to make my fortune as a musician, I'm going to meet all these cool people. You could find a dive for like £5 a week or something, and you could just live in squalor and it would be fine. Now you'd have to go with, like, have a reference, right? You'd have to get a reference, you have to go and find a place, and you'd have to, you know, have a guarantor and pay a deposit. And, you know, that has a really strong impact on who we are and on the art we make as well, like who that's open to.
Definitely. There's like, it's gentrification, I think, has really changed what inner cities look like, what cities in general look like. I think so. I've been looking up with my partner, various ways to kind of readdress that balance, and we've seen this thing called cooperative housing. So like cooperative housing is like essentially you sign up as a limited company with X amount of people who you want to be living with, and then collectively you like buy a house, like put down deposit for a house, and then your rent that you're paying is the mortgage. But the difference is, instead of like a landlord being like, hey, we're gonna have this amount, which is the mortgage amount, then a little bit extra for them to line their pockets with, it's kind of just like all determined within the collective. And the collective you can leave and join in any time, so it's not like, okay, we're buying a house and you have to stay in this house. It's kind of like this essentially it's like community owned housing. I just recommend anyone wanting to kind of readdress that balance, that power imbalance, look into cooperative housing. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah. So just before this, you sent me the lyrics of the song, which I was reading through for the first time, and there's actually a Nina Simone sample, which I didn't realise. And I'm a huge Nina Simone fan. So my musical style is piano based, classical and jazz piano combined with singing, and I play the guitar and do kind of folky stuff. So it's combining those interests. But on the jazz side, Nina Simone is a big influence. And I actually went to a Nina Simone concert, obviously, you know, a cover concert in Bristol, the Fever concerts, you know, the candlelit ones.
Oh, I haven't heard of that.
It's really cool. They do they do these amazing candlelit concerts in Bristol. But the thing that I found really interesting about Nina Simone, I don't know if you know this, but she was a classical pianist. She wanted to be she wanted to be a classical pianist, and because she was black, she wasn't allowed to perform. And so she said, well, you know, screw this, I'm gonna become this amazing, you know, jazz singer and jazz pianist. And actually, in some of her tracks, if you listen to some of her tracks, she does improv sections which are actual bits of classical. She kind of weaves that in. So as someone who does that with my music anyway, it's like really inspiring to hear that. But it's interesting. Yeah, it's so central to her music, isn't it? Like
definitely.
This identity. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's that really great documentary. I think it's called "What Happened, Miss Simone," where it goes through her speaking about her journey with her rejection from like the classical music college, and them literally saying because you're a Negro, we're not accepting black people into this. And I think actually just highlighted like her being like, screw this, going down a whole different route, becoming world renowned, and still weaving her passion, which was classical, into it. It's just like the most badass move. It's just it's just so awe-inspiring, and all the while as well pushing for like black rights during the civil rights movement. Like what a powerhouse of a woman. And I think a lot of her mannerisms as well really remind me of like my own mum's mannerisms in her unapologeticness, and her constant self-assurance, I think is the term. Like she's a very self-assured woman, who I'm sure Nina Simone has faced like a lot of hardship, and through all of that she is still very headstrong, not self-doubting, and sadly passed away 15 years ago, I believe, but has left a solid mark on the people of this world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one can only hope as a musician to leave some kind of legacy. I mean, that's, something you can aspire to. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost like even when she wasn't talking about politics or about being black, it was her life, her success was in some sense almost a protest. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, look, you said I couldn't do this, I can. And there is this interesting thing and as an artist, I was reading something about John Lennon, and he kind of considered towards the end, when his work was very political, his life to be a form of art, to be a form of social change because of the influence he had and the example that he was setting. And I don't know, it's fascinating where that line can be blurred between artist and art and the political, social and impact that you can have.
Totally. Yeah, totally agree with everything you just said. Very, how someone's life could be inherently powerful through their lived experience. But I guess that's the nature of humanity in a way. People live through hardship, make art about it, or make not even just art, just spread their experience, and that is inherently an empowering thing. I'm not sure. Do you listen to it? It's like Russell Brand.
Yeah.
I think he's really hits the mark for so many. In terms of like the intersections between societal and kind of spiritual occurrences in our society. Really melding together and fusing these different schools of thoughts in a way that's, I hope can be used to progress, humanity and what the future of humanity could potentially look like. But
he had that phase of talking about revolution, and for me I think it's about evolution rather than revolution. But I think what happens now is that we can evolve beyond duality. The nature of evolution, the nature of all sorts of changes, that it's the moment right before things pop into place that there's the most conflict. It's like you're trying to put a tent pole into a peg and it's like right at the end it's like but then you click it, and I think that's going to I honestly believe, I'm an optimist, but I think that's going to happen in our lifetimes. I think so. I think that we will find some resolution.
Yeah, then it's tough thinking about what does that clicking in bit involve? Does it involve like what methods? Like, does it involve purely non-violent? Does it involve violence? Like what? I guess time will tell. Yeah, that's a whole different conversation. But I definitely enjoy revolution versus evolution, and I look forward to exploring more of this after this conversation. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I was thinking maybe if we are going to plan revolution, this might not be the best place to do it.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this? Have you heard of this theory called Roko's bacillus?
I haven't.
It's basically to do with AI and how AI in the future is potentially going to be this all-knowing superhuman. Well, not superhuman, supercomputer that is aware of everyone who helped build this AI and is aware of everyone who tried to hinder where this AI is. And this theory basically is once this basilisk, which it's be the phrase that describes this super AI, once it becomes aware of everyone who has spoken against it, then it will murder you and your bloodline and all of these different things. I'll send you through
okay.
I'll send you through the thing. It's interesting.
The thing that occurred to me then, though, is that and then maybe that's true. Maybe we're all doomed. I don't know. Maybe we need to be very careful with what we say right now. I don't know.
This is that's what made me think about it. I'm like, don't say anything bad about AI. We love you, AI.
We love you, Overlord.
Yeah.
The thing about that actually is that it made me think: would an AI view things like revenge and people in the same way? I think we kind of personify things as functioning the same way humans do, but
very true.
I don't know. It's hard to say, because the thing about AI is that fundamentally we program it, and then there's that question of when does a programmed intelligence become a genuine self-conscious intelligence? I don't know, but I also am not sure that it would view us in that way, but maybe it would. I don't know.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, like you said, because we programmed it.
Yeah.
Like, when we put all of our human biases and, flaws into it as well. But if it's like a supercomputer that could, generate 1 million different equations, of different human emotions and how to express those, surely it would reach its own conclusions on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I just think, the other problem with computers, or the other thing about computers, is that it's inherently binary. It's ones and zeros. Fundamentally, the universe is broken down into ones and zeros. And in terms of what reality is like, life isn't fundamentally binary. I'm looking at this speaker over here, and it's black and yellow, and we can say, okay, well, this speaker is yellow, and then it's not yellow, and we've created a duality of A and not A. That's like that sense of duality, that sense of this exists and that doesn't exist, that's a verbal construct. B, it's a definition. I'm defining that as a person. C, the definition itself comes from the perception, but the perception is always secondary to the thing that's perceived. So, all which kind of says that the binariness of life comes out of I, as the person who is viewing and categorizing and analyzing and defining the world. It's not inherent to who we are.
Ah. Well, I checked out your website actually.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and I saw that you were sharing your story in terms of
leukemia.
You have leukemia, and just like in you sharing that and making art around it, and just you being you. That's an inherently powerful thing that you're doing. Like the message you're spreading is great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's really kind. And
Ah.
about 6 months after I started treatment, maybe slightly less, I was told that there was nothing they could do, and I was told. So I had to then face the fact that I was going to die, and that, of course, profoundly called into question: who am I? Who is going to die? What will be lost? What will remain? And it just, as a crisis of identity, who am I? What's going on? And I had this realization. I think I realized, in terms of that thing of who is my identity, who am I as a lived experience, and who am I as the person. I was like, okay, the person goes. The person doesn't matter to me. The idea of being Tom, being this person in the world with all these labels and identities, doesn't matter to me. What matters is the lived experience, and we can get so lost in the model of how we expect the world to be, in our sense of self and what we expect and need for the future, and how we identify ourselves with the past, that we lose touch with the pure experience of being. And I also began to realize, if I say I am Tom, and I thinking, I'm Tom, I'm going to die, I think there's three elements to that. There's the I, which is what I'm talking about, the perspective, the lived experience now, the perceiver. There's Tom, the identity, the person in the world. But there's also the am. There's the being itself. And that invisible sense of being is something that we can't think about or conceive, because everything that we can think about or conceive of it's being. If we were a fish in the water, you wouldn't think about water, because it's all there is, it's all you know, it's all you can conceive of. And so there is this great sea of being from which everything that we are is formed. It's the universal underlying quality of who we are. And I think that's actually as if not more essential to my life as there being a me, is just life itself, is being itself. And I don't know about life after death, and I don't know how I feel about that, but what I do know is that who I am now as Tom will go away. The I will disappear, Tom will disappear, but what goes on is being, is the am, is being itself, and that's the being that we all are, and that transcends myself. It's the smallest thing, it's the greatest thing. It goes on forever, and it's there where there is no time. And we don't perceive that because we get so lost in the I and the Tom and the you and the black and the and the you're this and you're that and whatever, and you belong here, and I think that if we can find a way, and I had to go through a very extreme experience to find this, but I'm sure if we can find a way to get to that, to let go of everything else and rediscover the ground of being, the sea of being, that being unencumbered by time and thought and self, that's when you recognize that I think the fundamental state of just being alive is actually serenity. And if we can, the things that we grasp for in terms of happiness and all this stuff is really a reflection of who we are, unencumbered, completely just purely alive. And that's, for me, that's what I got. I came to this realization out of being close to death, out of almost losing myself in a very literal sense. I was able to lose myself in that sense. And so that's my relationship with self, I suppose, and with being.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. That's very, very, very profound, and definitely a lot of points that I resonate with in terms. I think in terms of, you know, that there almost being this need to let go of identity or these external factors, and like you said, get back to the seed of what being is. I think that is just super important for us to be able to progress as beings in this place that we find ourselves. And I had a question. So in terms of your experience, you said where you say you let go of your body and you were surrounded by light.
The experience that I had was that I felt like I was in this dark boiling water, trying to keep my head above the water, and then I looked down and I felt like I was falling for a few seconds, and then I felt like I was flying and I was submerged in this light. There was this light around me. I felt like I was floating, and I say light, but it was more void. Buddhists would talk about an experience of seeing nirvana as being void, whereas the ancient Christian mystics would talk about the world as full of light. But actually they're talking about the same thing. It's just our kind of lens about the Eastern philosophy is much more about the void and absence and non-duality. So yeah, I guess you could say both, really, was my experience. And as someone who's got a mixed heritage in both East and Western, yeah,
that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Would you perhaps describe it as a form of like ego death?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. I woke up the next morning, or I went out the next morning, and it was like I was seeing the world unobscured by identity, but also more by thought, by time, by the person.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've really, really enjoyed hearing about all of that.
Yeah.
Like, not all of that.
Yeah.
No, I've really enjoyed the past 20 minutes of conversation. It's been very, a good amount to kind of re-spark just delving further into, like, you know, various philosophical, spiritual fountains of knowledge.
In so many ways, the experience that I've had has been a blessing, you know, especially the hardship. Actually, I've learned so much about myself. Of course, it's shaped the way who I am and how I perceive myself. And, you know, as you were saying earlier, the identity of expression of identity goes beyond art, and I think the sense of identity goes beyond societal mechanical identities and words. There's a value to being able to say, I'm black, I'm Asian, I'm queer, I'm, you know, whatever. But there's also, and there's a value to transcending those things as well. There's so much more power comes out of that, because something that's decided, something that's defined is kind of dead. It's kind of it's an object in the world, but the fact that something is uncertain and unsettled gives it power. When we break an atom, we break into the quantum realm. The power that's released, that power is almost non-duality. It's the uncertainty is what drives life, and the uncertainty of the future, and uncertainty of who am I, the identity of who I am, and all these different uncertainties that are in our lives, not uncertainties that we often basically try and destroy. Right? A lot of what's normative in society is to destroy uncertainty and make it certain and make it fixed and make it safe, but uncertainty is the driving force of life. And I think if we can accept and harness uncertainty, that can give us a huge amount of power and energy and drive us forward. And if we can make uncertainty and non-duality the cornerstone of a new society, not in the revolutionary sense, but as a principle, you know, to evolve from, I think that there can be a huge amount of power and energy coming into a new a more evolved world. I think. I hope.
Absolutely.
I hope.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Come on, Team Evolution.
Yeah.
No, for real though. Super profound, interesting chats. My brain feels very nourished.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. This podcast is funded by Arts Council England and Youth Music as part of Making Tracks, a partnership project between Trinity Bristol, Basement Studios and Aspiration Creation Elevation. Thank you to everyone who's made this possible, and thank you for listening.